Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Apalachicola Chattahoochee Flint River Basin Drought and Water webinar for the month of April. My name is Rachel McGuire, and I'm with the Auburn University Water Resources Center located in Auburn, Alabama. If you're new to the webinar, we'll have time for comments, questions, and discussion at the end after our last speaker. Throughout the webinar, feel free to use the question box on the GoToMeeting tool panel to type your question, or alternatively, you can use the raise your hand icon at the end of the webinar if you'd like to unmute yourself to ask a question. Today's speakers will be David Zierden, the Florida State climatologist with the Florida Climate Center at Florida State University. He'll speak with us on our current drought status, seasonal forecasts, as well as outlooks. We also have Michael Harper of the Alabama Department of Economic and Community Affairs Office of Water Resources with the State of Alabama input. We have Paul Inkhorn of the USGS South Atlantic Water Science Center, who will give us our stream flows and groundwater conditions. We have Cindy Donald of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Mobile District with our ACF reservoir conditions. Samantha Lucas of the NOAA Apalachicola National Estuarine Research Reserve with Apalachicola Bay and surrounding area salinity information. And lastly, we'll have Jeff Dober of the NOAA National Weather Service Southeast River Forecast Center wrapping things up with us for our ACF streamflow forecasts. So speakers, just as a reminder, let me know when you need a cue for your next slide. And with that, I'll turn it over to our first speaker, David Zierden.
Okay, thanks a lot, Rachel, and good afternoon, everyone. We'll begin this webinar like we usually do and look at current weather and climate events going on around the country in the Southeast United States. And the story this month is similar to last month, where it's the outbreaks of severe weather and this active pattern we've been in with just a series of energetic low pressure systems tracking across the deep south and the southeast United States. Here I have a satellite image of the low pressure system from this past weekend, Friday and Saturday. Thankfully, it did not produce a lot of tornadoes, a few, but not a lot, but it did produce a good amount of hailstorms. Some significant hail was reported in the Atlanta area and also as far south as Winter Haven and Orlando, as the picture over on the top right shows a really significant hailstorm in the Orlando area. There's also an image of the previous weekend, the April 10th through 12th event, which shows the Storm Prediction Center's severe weather outlook superimposed on all the severe reports from that 2 or 3 day event. And you do see several long track tornadoes mixed in, but also many reports of hail and also just straight line wind damage was significant. And over on the bottom right is from a hail event in Orange Beach, Alabama, right on the coast, and where they had baseball-sized hail, which is a very rare event for being that close to the coast and that far south. So tornadoes have been part of the story, but also straight line winds and hail damage have been a big part of the severe weather outbreaks we've been seeing. Over on the next slide, it hasn't all been severe weather though from this active pattern. It's been very regular or frequent rainfall. And here's a graph of both daily and accumulated rainfall for a station, the Fawn Station in Northwest Florida, Defuniak Springs. And you can see we've accumulated nearly 20 inches of rainfall in the Florida Panhandle since the 1st of March. But you also see since about mid-March, just this regular rainfall, events of 1 to 2 inches every 5 to 7 days. This has created some problems for farmers. While this kind of regular rainfall would be very welcome during the summer growing season, in some areas it's really hindering getting equipment out in the field and getting some planting done. So Hopefully, if Pam Knox is tuned in, she can expound on that a little more, on the effects of this just regular or frequent and above average rainfall across South Georgia and South Alabama and the Florida Panhandle. So on the next slide, we'll start moving into the drought discussion. And this is the current US drought monitor that shows a large portion of North Georgia, kind of the upper ACF or headwaters region, and certainly extending into South Carolina as abnormally dry. But after this last storm event and heavy rainfall, I expect a lot of improvement, especially over Georgia, when this is updated on Thursday. We also see abnormally dry across South Florida and one little spot of actually moderate drought in Southwest Florida, the Big Cypress National Preserve. So that's kind of the current state of things. We do expect some improvement. On the next slide, we'll take a look at the Lawn and Garden Moisture Index from University of Alabama, Huntsville. And it really shows the recent rainfall, especially across South Alabama, South Georgia, all of the Florida Panhandle and North Florida. You can also see how things are getting very dry up in the Carolinas, South Carolina, North Carolina, coastal and Piedmont areas. And also keep in mind with this Lawn and Garden Index, we are now in the time of the year where it's driven by a full 2 inches of effective rainfall. So it'll take more rainfall to moisten this product up, and it'll dry quickly with a period of rain-free days. So on the next slide, we'll start taking a look at recent rainfall totals. And these are the radar-based estimates from the National Weather Service. And these are the 7-day accumulations over the last week. And you see the impact of the last storm system with very heavy rainfall across the state line between Florida and Alabama, Florida and Georgia, South Alabama, South Georgia, very heavy rainfall of 2 to 4 inches or more. Lesser amounts and more spotty across the Florida Peninsula, and widespread but lesser amounts across North Alabama, North Georgia, and the upper ACF Basin. On the next slide, we'll look a little further back, and these are now 30-day rainfall totals. And you see the very heavy amounts across South Mississippi, Louisiana, even into the Florida Panhandle. The 30-day totals over 10 inches, even over 15 inches in some isolated locations. Also, widespread amounts of 4 to 6 inches across most of Alabama and South Georgia and a lot of North Florida. So very much above average rainfall over the last 30 days in these areas. On the next slide, we'll look even further back, and rather than rainfall totals, these are now departures from normal over the last 90 days. And you can really see, again, across Louisiana, southern Mississippi, South Alabama, South Georgia, much above rainfall at the 90-day period. This also includes North Alabama. However, there are portions of the middle ACF basin where rainfall totals are closer to normal or even a little below normal over the last 90 days. So a little bit of a mixed bag, but mostly above normal rainfall over the last 3 months. So we'll move on to the next slide and start looking ahead. And it looks like we've got a quieter period coming up in the next 7 days. You can see heavier rainfall is forecasted across Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, and up the Mississippi Valley. However, this is a more northerly storm track than recent storms, and it's leaving much of the ACF with only around 1 inch of rainfall forecast over the next 7 days. So a little bit more steady or stable weather expected in the next week. On the next slide, we'll take a look at the week 2 forecast, 8 to 14 days. And this kind of shows the pattern shift where over on the left, heavily favoring above normal temperatures or a warming trend across most of the eastern US and the southeast. And over on the right, we're now favoring below normal rainfall in this week 2 period. So we'll go ahead to the next slide and start taking a look even further out, and we'll look at the state of the Pacific Ocean, where we are still in borderline La Nina conditions, according to NOAA, that they just issued another La Nina advisory, which says we are in La Nina conditions, but they also anticipate that this La Nina advisory will be dropped in the next month. So it's decaying rather quickly. Over on the bottom is our familiar Nino 3.4 index, where we see we've been hovering right around that negative ½ degree Celsius threshold over the past several weeks, and the warming of this area of the Pacific continues. So we can just about write a post-mortem on this La Nina. But before we go to the next slide, a couple points. This has been one of those atypical years where, even though during the winter we were in these moderate La Nina conditions, at least moderate strength, we really didn't see the typical warm and dry pattern ever set up. So while we don't get this kind of La Nina response every event, we do more times than often, and this year was just one of those exceptions. So on the next slide, we'll take a look at the forecast for the Pacific Ocean, and here we see that La Nina conditions and neutral conditions are equally likely at about 50% over the next 3-month period, March, April, May. But as we go further into the late spring and summer, we see that very predominant likelihood that we are in neutral conditions through the summer. As we get towards the end of the summer and start anticipating next fall and winter, we see that, again, neutral and La Nina conditions are about equally likely. And however, there's only a very small chance of actually switching over into El Nino conditions or warmer than normal ocean temperatures. And over on the right are just the different model predictions. And you see there's quite a large spread. But if you look at the ensemble average, it's pretty closely within the neutral range for the next several months through the summer and into the fall. So we'll go to the next slide, and with that in mind, another point about this La Nina event this year, regardless of the state of the Pacific Ocean, once we get into the late spring and summer, it really loses its impact on the jet stream and our climate pattern. So regardless of the state of the Pacific Ocean, it doesn't give us a lot of predictability at this time of year anyway. And so with that in mind, this is the 3-month seasonal outlook from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center. You see, keeping with current trends over the past couple of decades, most of the United States is heavily leaning towards warmer than normal temperatures. But over on the right is the precipitation outlook, where they're actually calling for increased chances of above normal rainfall continuing over the next 3 months. So kind of a heads up there, we'll have to keep an eye on that. So on the next slide, we'll kind of wrap it up. This is the seasonal drought outlook. And now we see, because of recent rainfall, all of the Southeast, for the most part, is forecast to remain drought-free. The area shaded in South Florida is where moderate drought existed on last week's U.S. drought monitor. So it's simply shaded there to show that drought removal is likely in that area as we get the onset of the summer rainy season. So we'll go ahead to the next slide and wrap up. Oh, wait, I forgot this one. Because we've had such an active season last year and a lot of impacts in the Southeast and in the ACF Basin from hurricanes, both last year with Sally and a couple years ago with Hurricane Michael, this has been at the forefront of everyone's mind, so I wanted to get out in front of it. Colorado State University has released their early forecast, and they are calling for above average activity, 17 named storms, 8 hurricanes, 4 major hurricanes, which is above average, but it's not as high as last year's forecast, which is a little bit of good news. Kind of also in the news is that made the news is that NOAA has changed their definition of what an average hurricane season is. And this doesn't have anything to do with climate change or anything. It's just following the WMO standard of recomputing normals or 30-year averages every 30 years. So this new 30-year average includes the switch to the more active phase of the Atlantic hurricane season, which began pretty abruptly in 1995. Also making the news is while NOAA has not changed the official start date of the Atlantic hurricane season, it's still officially June 1st. They are going to start issuing daily outlooks on May 15th. So that's a change, and due to one of the driving factors is each of the last 6 years we've had a named storm before that June 1st official start date. So with that, we'll go ahead and summarize. This active pattern continued through April and brought severe weather and above normal rainfall to the northern Gulf Coast and much of the ACF Basin. There still is some D0 or abnormally dry over South Florida and North Georgia, but that looks to be improving with recent rainfall. If we look at simply rainfall totals, they're mostly above normal from anywhere from 7 to 90 days out. The exception is the middle ACF Basin where things are closer to normal. The short-term forecast calls for a more settled and warm weather over the next week. Above normal temperatures are favored in week 2 and possibly even continued below normal rainfall. The La Nina advisory continues, but will likely be dropped next month as we transition into neutral. The CPC seasonal forecast favors above normal temperatures, but also above normal rainfall for portions of the Southeast and the ACF Basin. The early hurricane season forecast from Colorado State University is for above normal activity, but not as much as last year. And drought development is less of a risk with the recent rainfall and also the anticipated onset of the summer rainy season over the peninsula of Florida.
Thank you, David. And before we move on to our next speaker, I just want to remind everyone, especially those of you that have called in by phone, to make sure that you're muted. I was hearing some audio feedback that may or may not have been from David's call in. So just check, especially if you've called in, to make sure that you've been hard muted on your phone. Thank you, everybody. And thanks again, David, for that update. Now I'll turn it over to Michael Harper of the Office of Water Resources with the State of Alabama input. When you're ready, Michael.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. I don't have a whole lot for this webinar. We start off showing the Alabama Drought Monitor map, and you can see it was much improvement since our last webinar when we had portions of the state in D1 conditions. And so now we have a little spot in south central Alabama, but most of the D0 that's left is in the Chattahoochee Basin in east central Alabama. Go ahead. As a result of our last meeting, our drought meeting, we issued a new drought declaration, and as you can see, it mirrors the drought monitor very closely, with mostly the Chattahoochee Basin there in Region 4 being listed as an advisory status. Go ahead to the next one. This link just shows you where our drought website is for our office. It's where you get to the declarations as well as any other information pertinent to drought that our office either provides, or just a great resource where a lot of information is put together for easy access. So in summary, the D0 that we see is currently about 4%, just over 4% of the state of Alabama, which is a great improvement from our last webinar. But hearing the forecast for above normal temperatures and below normal precipitation, We don't think this is going away just yet, so we may prolong D0 and possibly even see some expansion of the D0 in the next couple of weeks. Additionally, our declaration was updated at our last MIG meeting. At that meeting, there were no reports of any water availability issues. We are continuing to monitor conditions, and we do have another drought meeting scheduled for May the 11th. That meeting will be a WebEx meeting, and if anyone is interested in that meeting and wants to participate, just let us know, and we'll get you guys on the email list so that you can participate.
Thank you, Michael. And now I'll turn it over to Paul Ancorn with our stream flows and groundwater conditions. When you're ready, Paul.
All right, good afternoon, Rachel. Good afternoon, everybody. We'll begin as we usually do by looking at the network of real-time stream flow. This is across the southeast here. So last webinar is on the left, and current conditions as of this morning are shown on the right. So across much of the southeast, you can see, as indicated by the green pixels, green dots, that majority of the streams are currently flowing normal. There is a portion of eastern North Carolina there where streams are beginning to show some below normal flows. Then moving into the ACF Basin, you'll see majority of streams are currently flowing within normal range. And then in the lower portion, it's actually conditions are quite high there. You can see the black dots, mostly in the upper or lower Flint Basin, but there are some stations that are currently ranking as high and much above normal. So we're seeing the flow from this past weekend's event moving on down through the basin. So move over to the next slide. So this is this image, this graph here shows the percentage of stream gauges in each of the flow percentiles for the past 45 days. So this is just Georgia gauges, but you can see April 5th, we began to start to see some reduction in flow across a number of our gauges there as that orange mustard color started to increase through the 20th and then continuing into the 25th. So that rainfall this past weekend increased the flow, and then we see quite a few sites actually up in above normal and much above normal range. So that's what this weekend's past event did. It removed a good portion of the below normal flows that we were seeing. So as of the 26th, we had 5% and 4% much below and below normal respectively, and then 43% of our gauges were ranking normal, with 25% above normal and 20% much above normal, and 4% actually ranked as high. So seeing some good results from this past weekend's rainfall event. So look at the next slide. So this is the below normal 7-day average stream flow. It's an indication of hydrologic drought. And so you can see not a lot of change from the last webinar. And in fact, the ACF still remains hydrologically drought-free when compared to the below normal 7-day average stream flow. There's a few basins up in West Georgia, Fannin and Gilmer County, that are showing some below normal, but as a whole, the whole southeast is looking pretty good. All right, next slide. We'll start looking at some trends. So the black line there in each of the graphics is showing the 28-day average stream flow. So that's an indication of the average flow for the past 28 days. So both Chattahoochee River and Cornelia, these are our two main linear inflows. The past 4 weeks, both sites have actually been up, ranked up around much above normal and above normal. So they are both tailing off now. They're both still classified as above normal, but that is, yeah, that's the picture for the past 28 days flowing into Lanier. So next slide, just a slight departure. This is Chestatee River at Dahlonega. So this was March 26th on that Friday. We saw some pretty local intense rainfall in North Georgia. So we got the call to go out. So this is myself and Javier Spencer measuring from the bridge there at Chestatee, Dahlonega. So you see, we just missed the peak. That asterisk shows our measurement. So we measured just shy of 10,000 CFS. The station did actually peak around 15,000, which was a few hours, probably in the twilight hours before we got there. But just wanted to kind of highlight some of the work that our science center has been doing for the last few weeks. So next page, we'll get back into data again, continuing the 28-day average stream flow. So these are Chattahoochee at Atlanta and Whitesburg, moving downstream from Lanier. So Atlanta is just crossing into the 75th percentile, and Whitesburg is around the 70th percentile, so both currently ranking as normal. Next slide. Further downstream, so Chattahoochee at West Point and Columbus, both within the normal range. And next slide, we'll move over to the Flint River. So starting upstream at Griffin and then moving down to Carsonville, not a lot of fluctuation in the past 4 weeks or so. In fact, Griffin's really just crossing over into the 24th percentile, which is ranking below normal. So we didn't see the benefits of the last couple of pretty intense rainfall events that we've had. And Carsonville is currently ranking normal flow. All right, we'll look on the next slide as we move further downstream. So Albany and Bainbridge hovering right around the 50th percentile. So they are currently ranked well within the normal range. And then our next slide, we'll take a look at the, hello? Sorry, it's Apalachicola over at Chattahoochee. So conditions there are ranked as well within the normal range. Okay, now we'll switch gears to groundwater. So I'm missing the image on the right, as you can see. So currently our web-based tool Groundwater Watch is down. I'm not sure if they're going through some upgrades. I haven't received an answer as to why that is at this point. So I really can't color code conditions across the state. But take a look at the next slide. What I did, I just pulled the previous 4 weeks data as I have been doing for one of the reference stations. So this is Miller County. And so the elevations I had listed on that graphic, they're not showing up. But as you can see, 4 weeks ago, we were around 17 feet or so. And as of this morning, we're up to around 15.5 feet below ground or land surface. So what that tells us, when you look statistically, we're well into the above normal range for the groundwater elevation at Miller County. Next slide, Doherty County. So the same thing there. We are looking at around 20 feet for the current elevation below land surface. And again, based on the statistics, which is, I left the last webinar's graphic on the right just to kind of show what does happen this time of year. So, you know, the average mean elevation for the month of April is right at around 22.5 feet there. So we're into the above normal range, or at least for this day, but you can see that groundwater starts to drop off through April through August, and then of course sort of plateaus in September, and then we start to see the recharge come late September. So that's just an overview of the trend there. You do see what looks to be some sort of withdrawal effect in the last week of April there. But anyway, hopefully Groundwater Watch will be working for our next webinar. So last slide, we'll just go into the summary. So real-time stream flow for the ACF currently ranked from high to much below normal. There was one or two gauges that we were ranking much below normal, but not of concern. The below normal 7-day average stream flow indicates that ACF Basin is hydrologically drought-free. 28-day average stream flow for Chattahoochee River currently ranked from above normal to normal. The 28-day average stream flow for the Flint River currently ranked from normal to below normal. And then real-time groundwater levels at the two that I showed as our reference site currently rank in the above normal range. All right, Rachel, that concludes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. And now we'll have Cindy Donald give us our ACF reservoir condition updates when you're ready, Cindy.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. And I apologize for my audio quality right now. I am multitasking today, and I'm out in the field, so I'm outside. So, and I was able to pull up the webinar on my phone. Let me get to here. So the first slide, if you'll go to Beaufort, it's Lake Lanier. We got a good bit of rain over the weekend over the whole entire basin. The pool elevation is a little bit above guide curve, and we do expect to transition into the summer pool in about 4 weeks. We should be at elevation 1071 by the refill on June 1st. And the next slide is West Point. All right, can you still hear me? Because it said I was muted.
I can hear you now.
Okay. West Point is currently about a foot above guide curve, and we are still in the refill period. We do anticipate that we'll be able to refill by June 1st, which is always good. Next slide is Walter F. George. And we are about a foot and a half above guide curve at Walter F. George, and we do expect to transition into the summer guide curve of 190 over the next few weeks. And at all three projects, we are in actively fish spawn season. So we are doing our best to maintain a steady pool over the next few weeks to give ample opportunity. The next slide is Jim Woodruff. Funny thing about this weekend with Jim Woodruff, on Saturday at about 11 o'clock, it right at the top of the reservoir at Lake Seminole, we experienced about 6 to 8 inches of rain right at the top of the reservoir, and it significantly increased the inflows into the reservoir. It was an interesting weekend, to say the least, but over the next several weeks, we should be the pool should be right at 77.0. And the next slide is our Basin composite conservation and flood storage chart, and we have been in zone 1 all of this year and expect to remain in zone 1 over the next several weeks. The next slide. Inflows into the project. This is a summary slide. Inflows into the project are slightly above normal right now due to the recent rain event. Currently, the projects are operating slightly above guide curve. Lake Lanier, West Point are beginning summer refill, and Walter F. George begins on May 1st. And all projects are in fish spawn season right now. The ACF conservation storage is in zone 1 and is forecasted to remain in zone 1 for the next several weeks.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
And thanks for calling in from the field, especially. Now I'll turn it over to Samantha Lucas for the Apalachicola Bay daily average salinity levels when you are ready, Sam.
All right, can you hear me?
I can.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Hi, my name is Sam Lucas, and I'm a water quality technician in Apalachicola National Estuarine Research Reserve. Today, I'm going to be providing an update on the salinity data of 3 water quality stations we have positioned within the Apalachicola Bay system. Before we look at the data, I want to go over a map of the reserve. We have 6 water quality stations positioned throughout the bay that are part of SWAMP, System-Wide Monitoring Program. They are marked by the yellow icon. All National Estuarine Research Reserves participate in this program, and our stations collect data 365 days of the year at 15-minute intervals. We typically go out about every 3 weeks to exchange instruments, allowing continuous data to be collected. Now I'm going to go ahead and focus on the 3 water quality stations we will be discussing. If you look at this map, directly north of the weather station is a yellow icon, and that denotes our East Bay station. Here we collect data at East Bay surface and at East Bay bottom. East Bay functions as an important nursery in our system. Then if you go south of our East Bay system to the next yellow icon, that is our Cap Point station. And this is located on a historic commercial oyster bar. Now if you travel across the bay west, that is our Dry Bar station, and this is also located on a historic commercial oyster bar. And we'll be focusing on these 3 stations and their salinity data on the next slide. All right, so this is the daily average salinity at Cap Point. These percentile ranges were created from daily average salinity data from 1992 to 2021 for Cap Point. And the black line is denoting the 2021 average for the salinity average for this year. So for the salinity levels are remaining in the 25 to 75 percentile range for the current year, and there's not much deviation here. We do expect to see these levels increase as we begin to enter the dry season, and that is the typical response. And then let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Thank you. At our Dry Bar location, the salinity is decreasing from January to March, followed by a spike in salinity that then gradually decreases. The river water typically runs west through the system, and due to Dry Bar's position, it is impacted by this and tidal influences from the passes. It is hard to say what exactly caused this large spike in March. Next slide. And this is salinity for East Bay bottom. The salinity is typically lower due to its proximity to the river. High spikes correspond to lower flow events, and variability in river flow greatly impacts this station. So it'll be interesting to see what happens throughout the rest of the year as well. Next slide. Over the past few years, we've observed lower salinity values in response to increased freshwater input into the system relative to previous long-term data. When I reviewed data that we previously presented in 2018 and 2017 for April, this year's was much lower. And as I mentioned, Cap Point salinity values have been within the 25th to 75th percentile range for the current year. Dry Bar salinity decreased from January to March, followed by a spike in salinity, then gradually decreased. East Bay bottom salinity is typically lower due to its proximity to the river. High spikes correspond to lower flow events, and we expect to observe increasing salinity as we enter the dry season at all stations.
Thank you, Samantha. We're glad to have you guys back on the webinar with Apalachicola Bay salinity data.
Thanks.
And now I'll turn it over to Jeff Dober with our streamflow forecast for the ACF when you are ready, Jeff.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. So we'll start off here and show our 10-day river forecasts, ensemble river forecasts. These go out through the next 10 days, and so they give you an idea of the short to medium range flows at several locations in the ACF. We start out here in Lake Lanier, the inflows into Lake Lanier, And we can see flows right now, flows into the project right now are around 3,000 and expected to maintain that level until we get that next rain system here on Friday afternoon and Friday night, where we'll see inflows potentially picking up. The orange shaded area, that's the most likely zone of the forecast. So we're looking at maybe 3,000 to 5,000. But with the system, there's been a lot of uncertainty with this next system. It's a cold front, a relatively fast moving cold front, and we'll have some thunderstorm activity with it. And as you can see, there is the outlier there up to 11,000, but that's a very, very remote chance. But we will see some inflows pick up here going into the weekend with this next rain event. But then after that, it looks like we get, again, several days of relatively dry weather into early next week. So that's Lake Lanier. We'll go to the next slide and go down to the Whitesburg on the Chattahoochee, and you can see again that rain event, nothing significant, not expecting any flooding conditions on the upper ACF, on the upper Chattahoochee with this next rain event, but we will see inflows pick up. Again, there in the Chattahoochee at Whitesburg, and let's go jump over to the Flint River here at Lovejoy, and we see again some minor uptick in stage and flow as in the most likely range for the upper Flint there. And then let's go down to the lower Flint at Albany. Again, you can see that outlier there, and that's a compound of potentially all the outliers in the QPF, but the most likely range, most of the ensemble members are showing a minimal amount of QPF and a minimal amount of reaction in the rivers. And so for the most part, we're looking at the river remaining relatively flat here over the next 10 days in the lower Flint. And then finally, we jump down to the Apalachicola here at Blentstown. And as Cindy was pointing out, we had that big rain event last week where we saw the flows, like she said, all the heavy rain fell right on the lake up at Woodruff, and they had to increase their discharges quite a bit from about 20 to 40,000. And that's where we're at right now. And they're going to maintain that, I think, for a little while longer. But then with the drier weather, we'll probably see those discharges relax a little out of Woodruff, and that's what we're looking at as we go into the weekend and late next week. Really, it doesn't look like this next rainfall event will have big impacts overall on the ACF where additional releases will be necessary. At least that's the way it looks right now. So that is our 10-day forecast. As far as where we're at in the river flood climatology, we're in week 17 right now, and that puts us really on the tail end of our flood season here for Georgia and the ACF. And now we're going into May and into the summer months with the high evap rates and with the whole vegetation cover out, where flooding and higher flows become less regular, which is a good thing. But as far as water resources, as Cindy was putting, as far as Cindy was saying, many of our reservoirs are heading toward their summer pools, and it looks like they have plenty of water to do it. So we're really, seems like in a good condition right now, in between flooding and drought. So, and then we won't see anything really as far as flood wise. Typically, the climatology picks up in the late summer and fall with tropical activity. So when we talk about the 1 month forecast, we go to the next slide here and looking at May, as Paul pointed out, most of the rivers are in the near normal range. The upper Flint is hovering there, as he was showing, hovering in that range between normal and below normal. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But for the most part, if we get these regular fast moving systems that produce some rain, but not too much, we should stay in a good range here as far as stream flows for most of the month of May. And then as far as the 3 month outlook, we can see our ensemble stream flow prediction pie charts here for the next slide. And we can see that most of the percentiles are hinting that the highest probabilities are for near normal conditions. Not a lot of change from our last month's forecast here. But the only thing I will note is you can see the ES and the plot pie chart there for Lovejoy. Now we're on that cusp between below normal and near normal, and now the above normal probabilities are the least amount. So we'll have to keep an eye on that one in the Upper Flint. But for the most part, through the early summer and into really almost midsummer now, our best chances are for near normal stream flows for most of the ACF, which is a great thing. So in summary, we're not expecting any flooding in the next 10 days. And flooding becomes much less likely as we head into the month of May. And then our 1 month stream flow forecast, again, near normal. We'll have to keep an eye on the Upper Flint, and 3 month stream flow forecast near normal. That'll put us into the month of July. Don't forget about our 10-day guidance forecast can all be found on our MMEFS website, and all our official river stage forecasts can be also found on the AHAPS forecast link there. And that's all I have, Rachel.
Thank you very much. And now we want to take just a few moments to get some input from all of you that are online with us today about our ACF Drought Dashboard, and Meredith Muth, the NIDIS Southeast News Coordinator, will speak a few words and ask for some information for everyone to put into the chat.
Great, thank you, Rachel. And you're going to go ahead and let me present, is that correct?
Yes, that's right. I am sending the notification to you right now.
Okay, great. Excellent. So just a very quick reminder, I know we don't have a whole lot of time, so don't leave yet. I'm Meredith Muth. I am the Regional Coordinator for the Southeast Drought Early Warning System. I work with the National Integrated Drought Information System, NIDIS, which is one of the sponsors of this webinar. Just kind of stepping back, most of you probably know this, but several years ago within the ACF Drought Network, Drought Early Warning System Network, there was a request to kind of pull all this great information, including the information we heard today, into one place, because it's a lot of the drought and water information is scattered in many different places. And so from that request from the stakeholders of the community, NIDIS supported the development of an ACF Drought Dashboard. And right now we're working with Albany State, Auburn, and others to build this out based on user input. Last year we had 4 listening sessions, and we received a ton of great information on what what people are looking for in this drought dashboard. It's going to end up looking a lot different than we originally thought. Originally, we thought this was going to be, one GIS platform, but it turns out there's so many different needs that we've decided to instead provide several different components that could help people get what they want based on what they're looking for and based on their level of expertise and understanding of drought information. And so I do want to just let you know that we're going to have some targeted follow-up sessions where all of you are going to be invited and others to provide some direct input on our prototype. So you'll be able to walk through yourselves some of these dashboard components. But right now, I just want to give a quick sneak peek and get some initial reactions so that when we show this prototype, we make sure that we have some, we've checked off a lot of the big boxes. And so what you're looking right now at is a prototype, a mock-up of the landing page of the dashboard. And it's going to have 4 key components. You can see, I don't know if you can see my little moving thing, but if you want current and past conditions, you can go to click one box. If you want future information, outlooks and forecasts, you go to another. We're developing a story map that will describe in more detail why drought matters in the ACF. And then, of course, additional resources where you can go to get who you can contact, what are drought plans in each state, etc. And what I want to show you right now is just a very quick sneak peek of the current and past conditions. For those of you who have been exploring the new drought.gov, the US Drought Portal, you'll see this looks a lot like that, and we've used some of those templates. But For example, this dashboard will give, for those of you who work with media, really great areas for you to just kind of copy and paste sound bites of what the current status of drought is in the region. But we also, and of course, people can dig down to county level and state level and zip code level. But right now, I just wanted to highlight one thing and for you to think about and provide some initial input on current conditions. Like when you think about what you go to, if you want to know what's happening in the ACF, of course, hopefully a lot of it you heard on the webinar today. We're providing you with the right level of information. But if there are some key data sets or databases or products or tools that we don't currently have on this short list, we'd love to know. So we have the US Drought Monitor. We have, for short-term flash drought, we have the Evaporative Demand Drought Index, which we are going to get a presentation on next week, if you're next month. So tune into that if you're not familiar with that product. We have precipitation and temperature. We have, as we heard today, a lot on stream flow and reservoir storage. We're going to be working with the Corps and others to get more reservoir information, but we have 7-day and 28-day stream flow. If those are not the right if those are not the right parameters that you usually want, maybe again you can go into the chat right now or questions and just add, oh hey, we'd love to see this instead for stream flow. We've had a great conversation with the River Forecast Center about that data. We also have soil moisture. We're bringing in the Lawn and Garden Index from the University of Alabama, Huntsville, as well as the Coastal Salinity Index, which will add value to some of the salinity data in Appalachian Bay. And then we're also going to have some agricultural impacts as well. And then, of course, historical. So this was a lot, but just off the top of your head, you're a lot of the experts in the area who are tracking. If there are, again, key data that you think isn't here on that front page, we'd love for you to let us know what you'd like to see. Again, you'll have an opportunity to look through it in more detail during the upcoming sessions. And we're also going to have an opportunity to highlight other products and tools, but we don't want to overwhelm people with too much information and just wanted to have this really nice curated list of current conditions. So again, any initial reactions to that, you can go ahead and put that into, does it go into the chat box or question box, Rachel? I don't know what they have.
Let's, if you have suggestions, let's put it in the chat.
I don't know if, okay, so they have access to chat. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yes.
And then the last thing I'd like to just, and you can stop sharing or I can do that, is in that dashboard that the story map that I mentioned, we are including a number of different background on how water is managed in the ACF. What are some impacts from previous droughts? But really, we also want to highlight the impacts to ecosystems, to habitats, to terrestrial and aquatic habitats, to species. And we have a little bit of information, but I know a number of you on the call, I don't know if, for example, if Ben Emmanuel and others are still on the call, if you have experience in kind of observing, or you have documentation, or you have some stories to tell about how previous droughts have impacted ecosystems and the services and the species that they support, we would really love to talk to you. So just again, you can leave a quick note in the chat, or you can reach out directly to Rachel or myself. And do you have any, thank you, Ben. Is there anything else that you would like to add, Rachel? Again, this is just the sneak peek. I just wanted to take advantage of having everybody here, about 60 people on the call today.
No, I think that covers it. And also, if you want to take some time to digest this, or you'd like to look back at this screen share after we've posted the recording, you can certainly reach out to Meredith or myself by email if you need a little more time to look at what you just saw today. So don't hesitate to reach out after the fact or in response to our summary email that will go out in 24 to 36 hours generally after this call. All right, so while we give people time, if they'd like to enter in any suggestions for the dashboard in the chat, also we can take any questions or comments for our speakers today, I want to thank them once again: David Zierden, Michael Harper, Pauline Korn, Cindy Donald, Jeff Dober, and Samantha Lucas, and also Meredith Muth, of course. And now I'll give some time to check questions. I believe I saw one raised hand. Let's see, Thomas Puckett. I'll unmute you if you had a question. That might have been a raised hand by mistake. Any other questions or comments? All right, well, while we wait, if there's any more of those that come in, I want to remind everybody that our next webinar will be Tuesday, May 25th, same time, 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central. And as Meredith mentioned before, we have a guest speaker, Mike Hobbins, who will be speaking about EDI, the Evaporative Demand Drought Index. So if you're more interested in learning about that tool, definitely register if you've not. There will be a video recording of this webinar that we'll post on YouTube, and we'll link in our summary email that all of you will receive within a day or two. My contact information is displayed in the bottom left. If you have any more information you wanted to share, suggestions about the drought dashboard, or questions about this webinar, feel free to contact me by that email address. And thank you to everyone for being here today. We will see you next month.